The rain hammered against the towering glass windows of the Morrison Building in Manhattan, transforming the usually pristine view into an impressionistic blur of gray and steel. Isabella Clarke hurried through the marble-floored lobby, her leather briefcase clutched tightly against her chest, protecting the carefully prepared case files she'd spent the entire weekend reviewing. Her dark curls, usually perfectly styled, had surrendered to the humidity, forming wild ringlets around her face. "Hold the elevator," she called out, quickening her pace as she saw the doors beginning to close. A hand shot out, catching the door just in time, and Isabella slipped inside, slightly breathless. "Thank you, The words died in her throat as she found herself face to face with Ethan Williams. Even if she hadn't recognized him from the business magazines and financial news segments, his presence alone would have commanded attention. Tall and impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who was used to being in control. His dark eyes met hers with a hint of amusement, and Isabella felt her cheeks warm. "Cutting it close?" he asked, his voice carrying a touch of warmth that surprised her. The media always portrayed him as ruthlessly efficient, the bold risk-taker, who had transformed his family's investment firm into a powerhouse before he'd turned 30. "The rain," Isabella explained, trying to sound professional despite her dampened appearance. "It's turning the city into Venice out there." She pressed the button for the 47th floor, where Romano and Associates, the law firm where she was interning, occupied half the floor space. Ethan nodded, and Isabella noticed he'd already selected the 52nd floor, the executive offices of Williams Investment Group. The elevator began its ascent, and Isabella found herself hyper-aware of every detail: the faint scent of his cologne, the way his suit jacket fit perfectly across his shoulders, the subtle tap of his Italian leather shoes against the elevator floor. The first tremor was so slight that Isabella almost thought she'd imagined it. But then the lights flickered and the elevator gave a sickening lurch. Isabella stumbled, and Ethan's hand shot out to steady her, warm and solid against her elbow. Before either of them could speak, the elevator shuddered to a complete stop and the main lights went out, replaced by the dim glow of emergency lighting. "Perfect," Ethan muttered, reaching for the emergency phone. Isabella watched as his expression grew increasingly frustrated. Deadline, the storm must have knocked out the main power. He pulled out his cell phone, then frowned. "No signal, how about you?" Isabella checked her own phone, her heart sinking when she saw the no-service message. "Same." She glanced at her watch, 8:45 a.m. "I have a meeting at 9. "Meeting? With Richard Romano?" Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, actually, how did you—" "I'm supposed to be there too. Looks like we're both going to be fashionably late." He loosened his tie slightly and leaned against the elevator wall. "I'm Ethan Williams, by the way, though I'm guessing you already knew that." "Isabella Clarke," she replied, trying to ignore how the emergency lighting cast dramatic shadows across his features. "And yes, I did know. It's hard not to when your face is on the cover of Fortune magazine." A genuine smile crossed his face, transforming his features from merely handsome to devastating. "Ah, that unfortunate photo. My PR team was thrilled. I thought I looked like I was plotting world domination." Isabella couldn't help but laugh. "More like successful world domination. Your recent acquisition of Chen Technologies was brilliant, especially the way you structured the deal to protect the original R&D team." Surprise flickered across his face. "You follow corporate acquisitions?" "I'm specializing in corporate law," Isabella explained, feeling more at ease despite their unusual situation. "Your deal with Chen Technologies is actually part of my thesis research on innovative corporate restructuring." "Really?" Ethan's interest seemed genuine as he shifted to face her more directly. "What's your take on the employee stock option program we implemented?" The conversation flowed naturally from there, moving from corporate strategy to their respective backgrounds. Isabella found herself sharing stories about her childhood in Boston, her decision to switch from pre-med to law after a particularly inspiring constitutional law class, and her determination to make partner before she turned 35. "Ambitious," Ethan commented, his eyes studying her with new appreciation. But from what I've heard about your work at Romano's, you might do it sooner. Isabella blinked in surprise. You've heard about my work? Richard mentioned you in our last meeting. Said you caught a crucial oversight in the Martinez merger documentation that could have cost us millions. He was impressed, so was I. The warmth in his voice made Isabella's pulse quicken. She was used to being underestimated, to having to prove herself repeatedly in a field dominated by men who'd had every advantage, but Ethan spoke to her as an equal, his respect evident in every word. The emergency lights flickered, and Isabella suddenly realized how close they were standing. In their animated discussion, they'd gradually moved toward each other, and now, barely a foot of space separated them. In the dim light, Ethan's eyes seemed darker, more intense, and Isabella felt the air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Isabella, he began, his voice lower than before, but the rest of his words were cut off by a sudden mechanical groan. The elevator shuddered back to life, lights blazing on with almost painful brightness. They both blinked, the spell broken, as the elevator resumed its journey upward. When the doors opened on the 47th floor, Isabella gathered her briefcase, trying to ignore the way her hands trembled slightly. Well, that was certainly an interesting way to start the morning, she said, aiming for lightness. Indeed it was, Ethan replied, and something in his tone made her look up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, but it made her breath catch. I look forward to our meeting, Isabella Clark. As the elevator doors closed between them, Isabella stood rooted to the spot, her heart racing. She had the distinct feeling that something significant had just happened, something that would change the course of her carefully planned life in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. What she didn't know was that 52 floors above Manhattan's rain-soaked streets, Ethan Williams was having the exact same thought. 3 days after the elevator incident, Isabella couldn't shake the lingering effects of that chance encounter. The meeting with Romano and Associates had gone smoothly, though she'd been acutely aware of Ethan's presence across the conference table, his occasional glances in her direction, sending unexpected thrills through her body. Now, standing in her small but carefully decorated office, she found herself replaying their conversation, analyzing every word and gesture. A knock on her doorframe interrupted her thoughts. Ms. Clark? Her assistant Devon stood there with an elaborate arrangement of white orchids. These just arrived for you. Isabella's heart skipped as Devon placed the flowers on her desk. The card, elegant in its simplicity, read, Some conversations are worth being trapped for. Dinner tomorrow? E.W. Her fingers traced the embossed lettering, a smile tugging at her lips. Before she could formulate a response, her phone buzzed with a text from her brother Alexander. Surprise! In town for the week. Dinner tonight? Need to catch up. Isabella's smile widened. Alex had always been her rock, especially after their parents' divorce when she was 12. His protective nature had sometimes driven her crazy during college, but his guidance had helped shape her into the woman she was today. Absolutely. Morton's at 7? She replied, already looking forward to sharing her week's events with him. Though she hesitated at the thought of mentioning Ethan, Alex had attended Stanford Business School, and something told her their paths might have crossed. The rest of the day passed in a blur of depositions and client meetings, but Isabella's mind kept drifting to the orchids and their sender. At 6:45, she gathered her things and headed to Morton's, the exclusive steakhouse just 3 blocks from her office. Alex was already there, his broad smile visible through the restaurant's window. As soon as she walked in, he enveloped her in a warm hug. There's my favorite future Supreme Court justice. Still aiming for corporate law, you goof, she laughed, settling into their booth. How's San Francisco treating you? Incredible. The tech scene is booming, and our venture capital firm just closed 3 major deals. He studied her face carefully. But enough about me, you're glowing. What's new? Isabella took a sip of water, deciding to test the waters. Actually, I had an interesting meeting this week. Do you remember mentioning a classmate from Stanford? Ethan Williams? The change in Alex's expression was immediate and dramatic, His easy smile vanished, replaced by a tightness around his eyes that Isabella knew all too well. Ethan Williams? How do you know him? He's working with Romano and Associates on some corporate restructuring, she said carefully, watching her brother's reaction. We met during a meeting. Alex's laugh was sharp and humorless. Of course you did. Let me guess. He turned on the famous Williams charm? All intense eye contact and perfectly timed compliments? Alex, what aren't you telling me? Her brother sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so familiar it made Isabella's heart ache. Ethan and I were more than classmates. We were best friends during business school, until senior year when he slept with my girlfriend, Victoria. Isabella's stomach dropped. What? He had a reputation, Bella. The campus playboy who could charm any woman he wanted. But Victoria, she was different. We were together for 2 years talking about marriage after graduation. Then one night after a particularly wild party, Alex's voice trailed off, the old pain evident in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Isabella whispered, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Ancient history now, Alex said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Victoria and I eventually worked things out, but she took a job in London and the distance, he shrugged. Ethan and I never spoke again. Last I heard, he was continuing his conquests in Manhattan's social circle. Isabella's mind raced, trying to reconcile the man she'd met in the elevator, thoughtful, engaged, respectful, with her brother's description. The orchids on her desk seemed to mock her now, their pristine petals hiding thorny implications. Promise me you'll be careful, Alex continued, his protective instincts clearly kicking in. Ethan Williams is like a force of nature, exciting, powerful, and ultimately destructive. He doesn't do relationships, Bella. He collects experiences. The waiter arrived to take their orders, providing a welcome interruption. As Alex launched into stories about his latest projects in Silicon Valley, Isabella found herself lost in thought. The card in her office seemed to burn in her memory, its invitation now complicated by layers of history she hadn't known existed. Later that night in her apartment overlooking the city, Isabella stood at her window watching lightning flash across the Manhattan skyline. Another storm was rolling in, eerily similar to the one that had trapped her in the elevator with Ethan. Her phone lay on the coffee table, his dinner invitation still unanswered. Every logical part of her brain told her to decline, to maintain professional distance and protect herself from becoming another story in Ethan Williams's collection. But she couldn't forget the way he'd looked at her in the elevator, the genuine interest he'd shown in her thoughts and ambitions, the way his touch on her elbow had sent electricity through her entire body. The thunder rolled outside, and Isabella made her decision. Picking up her phone, she typed out a response, her fingers hovering over the send button as doubt and desire waged war in her mind. Finally, taking a deep breath, she pressed send. Dinner sounds perfect. Tomorrow at 8? I see. As she set her phone down, the city lights blurred through the rain-streaked window, and Isabella wondered if she was making a terrible mistake or stepping into the beginning of something extraordinary. The orchids on her bedside table seemed to glow in the darkness, beautiful and dangerous, just like their sender. What she didn't know was that across town, in his penthouse office, Ethan Williams was staring at her response with an intensity that would have surprised her. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't expected. Fear. Fear because when he closed his eyes, he didn't see just another conquest. He saw Isabella Clarke, and she was already becoming something far more dangerous than a simple dinner date. He saw possibility. Ethan Williams stood in his penthouse office watching the sunset paint Manhattan's skyline in shades of amber and gold. His reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows showed a man entirely in control, but internally, he was anything but. In less than an hour, he would be having dinner with Isabella Clarke, and for the first time in years, he felt genuinely nervous. The reservations at Le Bernardin are confirmed for 8, his assistant Regina announced from the doorway. And the private dining room is arranged as requested. Thank you, Ethan replied, adjusting his cufflinks, a habit from his younger days when he needed to channel nervous energy. That'll be all for today. Once alone, He allowed himself to acknowledge the weight of what he was about to do. Isabella wasn't just any woman, she was Alexander Clark's sister. The same Alexander who had once been closer than a brother. Before that night that had changed everything, the memory still burned with shame. His phone buzzed with a text from his closest friend, Daniel Chen, whose technology company he'd recently acquired. "Heard you're dating again. Should I alert the society pages?" Ethan's jaw tightened. His reputation preceded him everywhere, a shadow he couldn't seem to escape. "Not dating. Just dinner," he typed back, though even as he sent it he knew it wasn't entirely true. Something about Isabella felt different. At precisely 7:45, his private elevator descended to the lobby. The ride gave him time to reflect on the past few days, how thoughts of Isabella had invaded his normally disciplined mind. Her intelligence, her quiet confidence, the way she'd challenged his views on corporate restructuring, it all pointed to a woman who saw beyond his wealth and reputation. Le Bernardin's exterior gleamed in the evening light, its elegant facade a testament to refined taste. As Ethan stepped out of his car, he caught sight of Isabella approaching from the opposite direction. The sight of her nearly stopped his heart. She wore a deep blue dress that seemed to flow like water, her dark curls swept up to expose the graceful line of her neck. But it was her expression that captured him, a mixture of anticipation and wariness that suggested she knew more than she had in the elevator. "You look stunning," he said simply, offering his arm. "Thank you," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of reserve that hadn't been there before. "The restaurant is beautiful." The maitre d' led them to the private dining room, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. As they settled into their seats, Ethan noticed Isabella studying him with new intensity. "You spoke to Alexander," he said. It wasn't a question. Isabella's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't deny it. "He's in town. We had dinner last night." "And he told you about Victoria?" Ethan's voice was quiet but steady. "About what happened at Stanford?" "He did." Isabella's fingers traced the stem of her water glass. "Why didn't you mention you knew my brother?" The waiter arrived with champagne, giving Ethan a moment to gather his thoughts. Once they were alone again, he leaned forward slightly. "Because the moment I realized who you were, I knew it would complicate things. And I wanted you to form your own opinion of me. Is that what this is about? Forming opinions?" Her voice carried an edge now. "Or is it about collecting experiences, as my brother put it?" The words hit him like a physical blow, but he forced himself to maintain eye contact. "I was different then. Younger, more arrogant. What happened with Victoria and Alexander is my greatest regret." "Why did you do it?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Ethan considered deflecting, giving her the polished explanation he'd crafted over the years. But something in Isabella's direct gaze demanded honesty. "Because I was jealous," he admitted, the truth feeling raw in his throat. Not of Victoria, of what they had, the certainty, the future they were planning. I'd grown up watching my parents' loveless marriage, seeing how they stayed together for appearances, for the company. I didn't believe real love existed, so I set out to prove it. By destroying your best friend's relationship? By proving that all relationships were ultimately fragile, that love was just a convenient fiction. He took a slow breath. I was wrong. What I did was unforgivable, and I've carried that knowledge every day since. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those penetrating eyes. And now? What do you believe now? The waiter returned to take their orders, but Ethan barely registered the menu choices. When they were alone again, he found himself speaking with an honesty that surprised even him. Now? I believe in possibility. In the idea that people can change, that the past doesn't have to define the future. He met her gaze steadily. The man I was at Stanford would have seen you as a conquest. The man I am now sees you as someone who makes me want to be better. A flash of vulnerability crossed Isabella's face. Those are beautiful words, Ethan. But how do I know they're real? You don't, he acknowledged. All I can offer is time. The chance to prove that I'm not that person anymore. He paused, then added softly, and the promise that whatever happens between us will be real. No games, no hidden agendas. Their first course arrived, the elegant plating a stark contrast to the raw emotions flowing between them. As they began to eat, the conversation gradually shifted to lighter topics. Their work, their dreams, their views on everything from literature to technology. Yet underlying every word was an awareness of the stakes involved, of the past's power to shape the present. Later, as they walked along the moonlit streets of Manhattan, Isabella stopped suddenly. I should hate you, she said quietly. For what you did to Alex, I should walk away right now. Ethan's heart constricted, but before he could respond, she continued, But I don't. I see something in you that feels genuine, something that scares me because it makes me want to believe in second chances. She turned to face him fully. I'm not Victoria. I won't be a chapter in your story of conquests. You could never be, just a chapter, Ethan replied, the words coming from somewhere deep and true. You're already rewriting the whole book. The city hummed around them, 1,000 stories playing out in the buildings that stretched toward the stars. But in that moment on that street corner, only their story seemed to matter. A story of redemption, of trust cautiously offered, of the possibility that people could change and love could heal old wounds. What neither of them saw was the figure watching from across the street, Alexander Clark, his expression dark as he observed his sister and his former best friend, the past and present colliding in ways he had never anticipated and could not accept. The morning after her dinner with Ethan, Isabella arrived at her office to find Alexander waiting, his usually warm features set in hard lines. Her heart sank. She knew that expression all too well. Alex, what are you doing here? Funny. Thing happened last night, he said, his voice carefully controlled. I was heading back to my hotel when I saw my sister having what looked like a very intimate dinner with Ethan Williams, the same man I specifically warned her about. Isabella closed her office door, grateful for the privacy. You were following me? I was protecting you, Alex countered, pacing the small space. Do you have any idea what you're getting into? This is what he does, Bella. He finds smart, successful women, makes them feel special, and then... I'm not Victoria, Isabella interrupted, her voice firm. And I'm not 22 anymore. I can make my own decisions about who I spend time with. He told you exactly what you wanted to hear, didn't he? Alex's laugh was bitter. Let me guess, he's changed, he regrets his past, he sees something special in you that makes him want to be better. The words hit too close to home, making Isabella's chest tighten, but she remembered the raw honesty in Ethan's eyes when he'd spoken about his past, the vulnerability that no practiced seducer could fake. You're not being fair, she said quietly. People can change in 6 years, Alex. I'm not asking you to forgive him, but please trust my judgment. Like Victoria trusted his intentions? Alex stepped closer, his voice dropping. He didn't just sleep with her, Bella. He pursued her for months, knowing exactly what it would do to me. It was calculated, deliberate. And now he's doing the same thing with my sister. Before Isabella could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. Last night was incredible. Lunch today? Alex caught the notification and his expression darkened further. Perfect timing. Tell me, does he always follow up the morning after? Make sure to keep the connection warm. That's enough. Isabella's voice cracked like a whip. I love you, Alex, but you don't get to dictate my life. What happened with Victoria was terrible, but it's not my story. I need to write my own. Even if it ends the same way, even then, she met his gaze steadily. Because that's my choice to make. Alex stared at her for a long moment before heading to the door. When this blows up, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. He paused, hand on the doorknob. Just remember, he's not just risking your heart this time. He's risking our relationship too. The door closed behind him with a decisive click, leaving Isabella alone with thoughts that threatened to overwhelm her. She sank into her chair, trying to steady her breathing when her phone buzzed again. I can't stop thinking about last night. About you. About everything we talked about. E. Despite her brother's warnings echoing in her mind, Isabella found herself smiling. She typed back, "Lunch sounds perfect. 1 p.m. The response was immediate. I'll send a car. There's something I want to show you. At precisely 1 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside her office building. Isabella slid into the back seat, her heart racing when she found Ethan already waiting. Hi, he said simply, but the way he looked at her made her breath catch. Where are we going? You'll see. His smile was mysterious as the car wound through Manhattan streets, finally stopping at a construction site in Brooklyn. This doesn't look much like lunch, Isabella observed as Ethan helped her out of the car. Patience counselor. He led her into the building past workers in hard hats who nodded respectfully. They took a freight elevator to the top floor, and when the doors opened, Isabella gasped. The space was raw and unfinished, but floor to ceiling. Windows offered a spectacular view of Manhattan across the river. Construction materials were everywhere, but in the center of the room stood a small table set for two, complete with white tablecloth and flowers. What is this place? My newest project, Ethan explained, leading her to the table. We're converting this building into a community center and affordable housing complex. The top floor will be a free legal clinic. Isabella turned to him in surprise. A legal clinic? The neighborhood needs it, he said, pulling out her chair. And I happen to know a brilliant young lawyer who's passionate about making legal services accessible to everyone. You remembered that. During their dinner, she'd mentioned her dream of starting a pro bono clinic, but it had been a passing comment. I remember everything you say. His voice was soft but intense. After you left last night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what you said about wanting to make a difference, not just a profit. So I made some calls, revised some plans. Ethan. Isabella's throat felt tight with emotion. This is incredible, but you don't have to do this to impress me. I'm not. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I'm doing it because you made me see something I've been missing. All these years I've been focused on building wealth, on proving something to the world. But you made me want to build something meaningful. The sunlight streaming through the windows turned his eyes to warm amber, and Isabella found herself drowning in their sincerity. But Alex's words, from that morning, nagged at her consciousness. My brother came to see me this morning, she said quietly. He saw us last night. Ethan's hand tightened slightly on hers. I assumed he would. What did he say? He thinks this is all part of your plan, that you're... She couldn't finish the sentence. Using you to hurt him again? Ethan's voice was pained. Isabella, look at me. He waited until she met his eyes. What happened with Victoria was about my own demons, my own inability to believe in love. This us. It's about believing again. About becoming the man I should have been back then. A warm breeze swept through the unfinished space, carrying the promise of spring. In that moment, Isabella made a decision that would either break her heart or heal it completely. Show me, she whispered. Show you what? Show me who you really are, not the businessman, not the reformed playboy, not my brother's former friend, just you. Ethan stood slowly, drawing her up with him. They stood face to face, the Manhattan skyline bearing witness as he cupped her face in his hands. I'm terrified, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Terrified because for the first time in my life I can't control what I'm feeling. Can't strategize or plan or protect myself. You've stripped away every defense I've built, and I don't want them back. Then he kissed her, and Isabella understood what people meant when they said kisses could change lives. This wasn't the practiced seduction she'd been warned about. It was raw, honest, almost desperate in its need to connect. What they didn't know was that at that very moment, Alexander Clark was making calls of his own. Calls to old classmates, to business associates, to anyone who might have dirt on Ethan Williams, because if his sister wouldn't protect herself, he would do it for her, even if it meant destroying the man she was falling in love with. In the unfinished room high above Brooklyn, Isabella and Ethan broke apart, both breathing heavily. The city stretched out behind them, a tapestry of possibilities and dangers, of past mistakes and future promises. "We can't go back from this," Isabella whispered. "I don't want to go back," Ethan replied. "Only forward. With you." The words hung in the air between them, a promise and a prayer. Neither of them could know that soon. Every word, every promise, every kiss would be tested in ways they couldn't imagine, because Alexander Clark was a man who protected his own, and he was about to unleash a storm that would either wash away their budding love or prove it strong enough to weather any tempest. Alexander Clark sat in his temporary office at Goldman Sachs, staring at the email that had just arrived from a former classmate at Stanford. The attached documents painted a picture that made his blood run cold. A series of non-disclosure agreements, all involving women from Ethan's past, all settled within the last 5 years. His phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. "Missing. Our weekly coffee. Dinner tonight?" Alex's jaw clenched. In the 2 weeks since he'd confronted her about Ethan, their relationship had grown increasingly strained. Every time he saw them together in the society pages or heard about their latest public appearance, he felt the weight of failure as a protective older brother. "Can't tonight, meetings tomorrow?" he replied, buying time to compile his evidence. Across town, Isabella was having lunch with Regina Martinez, Ethan's assistant of 7 years, who had surprisingly reached out to her that morning. "I've never seen him like this," Regina admitted, stirring her coffee. "In all these years, he's never once changed his schedule for a woman. But last week he postponed a board meeting because you had that case running late." Isabella felt warmth spread through her chest at the memory. Ethan had surprised her at the courthouse with dinner, turning her cramped office into an intimate bistro complete with candles and her favorite Thai food. "He's different than I expected," Isabella confessed. "Everyone keeps warning me about his past, but the man I know is thoughtful, genuine." "He is now," Regina agreed, then hesitated. "But you should know. There are things in his past that aren't public knowledge. Things that Alexander might—" Isabella's phone rang, cutting off Regina's words. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," she answered, trying to ignore Regina's knowing look. "Cancel your afternoon," Ethan said without preamble, his voice carrying an excitement she'd never heard before. "I need to show you something." An hour later, Isabella found herself back at the Brooklyn construction site, but this time, Ethan led her to a different floor. When he opened the door, she gasped. The previously empty space had been transformed into a rough mock-up of a legal clinic, complete with reception area and private consultation rooms. "The architects finished the preliminary designs," Ethan explained, watching her face. "I wanted you to be the first to see it, to make sure it matches your vision." Isabella walked through the space, touching the temporary walls, imagining the lives that could be changed here. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning to face him. "But Ethan, this must be costing millions." "Worth every penny," he said, closing the distance between them. "Especially to see that look in your eyes right now." He kissed her then, and Isabella melted into him, all thoughts of Regina's warning and Alex's disapproval fading away. But when they broke apart, Ethan's expression had grown serious. "There's something else I need to tell you," he said, leading her to sit on one of the plastic chairs. "Something about my past that you need to know before—" A sharp ring interrupted him. Isabella's phone showed Alex's number. "I should take this," she said apologetically. "He's been distant lately." Ethan nodded, but his expression remained troubled. Isabella answered the call, immediately sensing her brother's tension. "Bella, we need to talk. Now. It's about Ethan." "Alex, I'm actually with him right now." "Perfect. Put me on speaker." Something in his tone made her comply. "You're on speaker." "Tell her, Ethan." Alex's voice crackled through the phone. "Tell her about the NDAs, about why Victoria wasn't the last woman you destroyed." The color drained from Ethan's face. "Alexander, this isn't 5 women in the past 5 years," Alex continued relentlessly, "all silenced with money and legal agreements. Is that what you're planning for my sister too? Another NDA when you're done with her?" Isabella's heart hammered in her chest as she turned to Ethan. "What is he talking about?" "It's not what you think," Ethan said, his voice strained. "Those agreements were protection," Alex cut in. "Protection for him, not them. Did you know about Olivia Reed, the junior analyst who left Wall Street after 3 months in his company? Or Christina Torres, who transferred to London suddenly after working closely with him on the Asian market expansion?" "Stop." Isabella's voice shook. "Alex, please." "He's right," Ethan said quietly. "There are NDAs. But Isabella, I was trying to tell you." "Were you?" she asked, standing abruptly. "Or were you just showing me this clinic, making me fall deeper before I could find out the truth?" "The clinic has nothing to do with this." For the first time, she heard real anger in his voice. "Yes, I have a past. Yes, there are agreements. But they're not what Alexander is implying." "Then what are they?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Through the phone, Alex's breathing was the only sound. "I can't tell you," Ethan finally said. "Not without breaking legally binding agreements." Isabella laughed, but the sound held no humor. "Right, of course." She grabbed her bag, heading for the door. "You know what the worst part is? I actually believed you had changed." "Isabella, wait." Ethan caught her arm. "Please, give me time to handle this legally, to find a way to explain. I'm a lawyer, Ethan. I know exactly what NDAs mean." She pulled away from him. "They mean secrets, they mean shame, they mean things too ugly to see the light of day. Or they mean protection," he said softly. "Sometimes they protect the innocent, not the guilty." She paused at the door, not turning around. "Goodbye, Ethan." The sound of her heels echoed through the empty space as she walked away, each step feeling like a knife in her chest. Behind her, she heard the distinct sound of something being thrown, followed by a crash. In his borrowed office, Alexander Clark ended the call, satisfaction warring with concern. He'd protected his sister, but the pain in her voice. Opening his email, he began to dig deeper into the NDAs, looking for anything that might justify Ethan's cryptic last words. Back in the half-finished clinic, Ethan stood among the broken remains of a chair he'd hurled against the wall. His phone showed a text from Regina. "She deserves to know the truth." "The truth," he whispered to the empty room. "The truth would destroy everything." But as he stared at the space that had represented so much hope just hours ago, Ethan Williams made a decision that would either cost him everything or finally free him from the shadows of his past. Because sometimes, he realized, the only way to prove you've changed is to face the very demons you've been running from. What he didn't know was that those demons were about to surface in ways none of them could have predicted, forcing choices that would test not just his love for Isabella, but the very essence of who he had become. 3 days after walking out of the Brooklyn construction site, Isabella sat in her office, staring blindly at case files she couldn't focus on. The orchids Ethan had sent weeks ago were wilting, their decay a perfect metaphor for her current state of mind. A knock on her door made her look up. Regina Martinez stood there, holding a thick manila envelope. "You shouldn't be here," Isabella said quietly. "You work for Ethan." "Actually, I resigned this morning." Regina closed the door and sat down. "Because what's in this envelope is more important than my job." Isabella's heart rate picked up. "What is it?" "The truth about the NDAs. The real story that Alexander's investigation didn't uncover." Regina placed the envelope on the desk. Ethan doesn't know I'm here. If he did, he'd try to stop me. He spent years protecting these secrets, but not for the reasons you think. With trembling fingers, Isabella opened the envelope. Inside were copies of police reports, medical records, and correspondence that made her blood run cold. The first file detailed a domestic violence case involving Olivia Reed, not against Ethan, but against her wealthy, politically connected husband. Olivia was being abused, Regina explained softly. She came to work one day with bruises she couldn't hide. Ethan noticed. Instead of just reporting it, he helped her escape. The NDA was to protect her location from her husband, who had friends in law enforcement. Ethan paid for her relocation, her therapy, her fresh start. Isabella's throat tightened as she read through the other files. Cristina Torres had discovered financial corruption in her department, illegal trading that implicated several board members. The NDA had protected her whistleblower status while Ethan quietly gathered evidence and removed the corrupt executives. Each agreement told a similar story: women who needed protection not from Ethan but from powerful people who could destroy their lives. He had used his wealth and influence to shield them, accepting the appearance of impropriety rather than exposing their vulnerabilities. Why? Isabella whispered. Why take on that burden? Those assumptions about his character? Because of his mother, Regina said quietly. Did he ever tell you about her? Isabella shook her head. She died when he was 16. Officially, it was ruled an accident, a fall down the stairs. But Ethan knew the truth. His father had pushed her during an argument. There were witnesses, servants who saw it happen, but his father's influence ensured their silence. NDAs buried the truth along with his mother. Horror and understanding washed over Isabella in equal measure. So when he sees someone vulnerable, he can't walk away, Regina finished. Even if it means people think the worst of him. Even if it costs him everything. Isabella's phone buzzed. A text from Alex. Found something else on Williams. Call me. I have to go, Isabella said suddenly, gathering her things. Thank you, Regina. For everything. 20 minutes later, she was walking into Alexander's office at Goldman Sachs. Her brother looked up from his computer, his expression grim. You need to see this, he said, turning his screen toward her. More evidence of... Stop. Isabella's voice was firm. Before you show me anything else, you need to see what Regina brought me. She spread the documents across his desk, watching as his expression shifted from skepticism to shock to something approaching shame. This can't be real, he muttered, but she could see the truth sinking in. It is. And there's more. She told him about Ethan's mother, watching her brother's face pale. All this time, Alex whispered. I've been so focused on Victoria, on what he did to us. I never asked why. Because sometimes it's easier to hold on to anger than to consider a more complicated truth. Isabella said softly. I need to find him, Alex. Now. But when she tried calling Ethan's number, it went straight to voicemail. His office reported he was in meetings all day. As evening fell, Isabella found herself in a taxi heading to his penthouse apartment, her heart pounding with each floor the elevator climbed. The doors opened directly into his living room, dark except for the city light streaming through the windows. Ethan stood at the glass wall, his reflection showing a man she barely recognized, tie loosened, hair disheveled, glass of whiskey in hand. Isabella. He didn't turn around. How did you get up here? Regina gave me her key, card before she left. She moved closer. She also gave me the truth. Now he did turn, his eyes haunted. She shouldn't have done that. Why not? Because it ruins your carefully constructed image as the villain? Because it shows who you really are? Because those women trusted me to protect them. His voice cracked. Their safety depends on those secrets staying buried. Like your mother's truth stayed buried? The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Isabella closed the distance between them, careful of the broken glass. You were 16, she said softly. A boy who couldn't save his mother. So you grew into a man determined to save everyone else, even at the cost of your own happiness. Don't, he warned, but she could see his walls crumbling. When you slept with Victoria, she continued, was it really about destroying Alex's happiness? Or was it about proving that all relationships were as toxic as your parents? That love always ended in betrayal? Stop. The word was barely a whisper. No. She reached up, touching his face. Because you need to hear this. What happened to your mother wasn't your fault, and punishing yourself by pushing away real love won't bring her justice. Something broke in him then. His knees gave way, and Isabella caught him, lowering them both to the floor beside the broken glass. She held him as years of carefully contained grief poured out, his body shaking with sobs that should have been released decades ago. I see them, he gasped between breaths. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. The women who need help, who have no one else to turn to. I can't walk away, I can't. You don't have to, she whispered, stroking his hair. But you don't have to carry it alone anymore either. They sat there as the city lights painted patterns on the floor, the broken glass around them catching and reflecting the glow like scattered stars. When Ethan finally looked up, his eyes were red but clearer than she'd ever seen them. I love you, he said simply, and that terrifies me more than anything else in my life. Good, Isabella replied, wiping tears from his cheeks. Because love should terrify us, it means we have something real to lose. He kissed her then, a kiss that tasted of salt and whiskey and truth finally spoken. Neither of them noticed Alexander standing in the elevator doorway, having followed his sister out of concern. He watched them for a moment, seeing not the playboy who had betrayed him, but a broken man finally letting someone help him heal. Quietly, Alex stepped back into the elevator, understanding at last that some stories were more complex than simple betrayal, and some wounds could only be healed by the very thing that had caused them, love. What none of them knew was that somewhere in the city, one of the women Ethan had helped was about to face a crisis that would force all their carefully guarded secrets into the light, testing not just Ethan's commitment to protection, but Isabella's newfound faith in him. Because some truths once unveiled cannot be buried again. The morning headlines hit like a thunderbolt. Tech billionaire Richard Reed announces Senate bid. Isabella stared at her phone, recognizing the name immediately. From Regina's files, Olivia Reed's abusive ex-husband. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Turn on CNN. She did, just in time to see Richard Reed standing at a podium, his perfect political smile gleaming as he announced his campaign for the New York Senate seat. Behind him stood a beautiful blonde woman, his new wife, her practiced smile, masking whatever secrets she might know about her husband's true nature. Born and raised in New York, Reed was saying, I understand the challenges facing our great state, and with my experience in technology and business. Isabella's phone rang. Ethan's voice was tense when she answered. We have a problem. Olivia just called me, she's terrified. Where is she? Boston, but she's talking about running again. Reed's people have already reached out to her, suggesting she make a public statement supporting his campaign. The disgust in his voice was palpable. They're calling it reconciliation, a touching story of forgiveness and growth. And if she refuses? The NDA works both ways. If she speaks about the abuse, she violates the agreement. They'll destroy her. Isabella's legal mind raced through options. But if we can prove the NDA was signed under duress, Isabella, Ethan's voice softened. There's something else. Olivia's pregnant. 5 months. She's finally building a new life, and now. The implications hit hard. A pregnant woman running from an abusive ex who was about to become one of the most powerful men in New York. The stakes had just gotten monumentally higher. We need to meet, Isabella decided. All of us, Olivia, Regina, you, me, and... She hesitated, then added, Alex. We need his political connections. 2 hours later, they gathered in Ethan's penthouse. Olivia Reed sat on the leather couch, her hands protectively cradling her small baby bump. She was younger than Isabella, had expected, with intelligent eyes that held too much knowledge of life's darker sides. Alex paced by the windows, his expression troubled. Since discovering the truth about Ethan's past, he'd thrown himself into helping, as if making up for years of misplaced anger. Reed's campaign is gaining momentum, he reported. Early polls show strong support. His tech background appeals to younger voters, and his family values platform is resonating with conservatives. Family values, Olivia whispered, her voice bitter. If they only knew. The problem is proof, Regina said, spreading documents on the coffee table. The hospital records from Boston are sealed. The witnesses from the household staff all signed NDAs. And the security footage from their apartment building mysteriously disappeared. But you kept copies, Isabella said, looking at Ethan. He nodded grimly. Everything. But using it means exposing not just Olivia but the other women too. Christina's whistleblower case is still ongoing. Lauren's stalker is still out there. If these NDAs start falling, then we find another way, Isabella insisted. Reed's campaign is built on his image. We don't need to expose the abuse directly, we just need to crack the foundation of his credibility. Alex stopped pacing. The Chen Technologies deal. Everyone turned to look at him. What about it? Ethan asked. Reed's company was the main competitor for the acquisition, but they pulled out suddenly right before you swooped in. Alex's eyes lit with recognition. That was right after Olivia came to you, wasn't it? Ethan's expression remained carefully neutral. The timing was convenient. You blackmailed him, Isabella realized. Used what you knew to force him to back off the deal. I never explicitly threatened anything, Ethan said carefully. I merely arranged a private meeting where we discussed various matters, business, personal, political. Afterward, he chose to withdraw from the bidding. Olivia straightened. Use that, the business angle. It's not about me then. It's about his judgment as a leader, his ability to handle pressure. We'd need more, Regina cautioned. Something current. The Chen deal was 2 years ago. Isabella's legal training kicked in. The campaign finances, Alex, can your contacts get us his donation records? Not just the official ones, but the super PACs, the dark money? Already working on it. But we need to move fast. The primaries, in 6 weeks. A knock at the door silenced everyone. Regina checked the security camera and froze. It's Reed's campaign manager. The tension in the room became palpable. Ethan quickly led Olivia to his home office while Regina gathered the scattered documents. Isabella and Alex remained in the living room, trying to look casual. The campaign manager, Daniel Foster, strode in with the confidence of someone used to getting his way. Mr. Williams, always a pleasure. His smile didn't reach his eyes. And Alexander Clark? Interesting company you're keeping these days. What can I do for you, Daniel? Ethan's voice was perfectly pleasant, betraying nothing. Richard wanted me to personally extend an invitation to his campaign launch gala next week. You've been conspicuously quiet about his announcement. I've been busy with other matters. So we've noticed. Foster's eyes flickered to Isabella. Like your new relationship. Quite a story. The reformed playboy and the ambitious young lawyer. The society pages are eating it up. The threat was subtle but clear. Reed's team had been watching them. Is there a point to this visit? Alex asked, his tone icy. Just ensuring everyone understands their roles in the coming weeks. Foster smiled again. Some stories are better left in the past, wouldn't you agree? For everyone's sake. After he left, they retrieved Olivia, who had heard everything through the office door. Her hands shook as she accepted the water Ethan offered. They know, she whispered. They're warning us. No, Isabella said firmly. They suspect, but they don't know. If they had proof we were helping you, they wouldn't bother with warnings. Isabella's right, Ethan added. They're fishing, trying to pressure us into showing our cards. Then let's show them something else entirely, Alex suggested. The gala next week we should all attend. Show unity. Make them think they've won. While we work behind the scenes, Isabella finished, understanding his strategy. It's dangerous, Regina warned. One wrong move. Everything worth fighting for is dangerous, Ethan said quietly, his eyes meeting Isabella's. But we don't have to fight alone anymore. Later that night, after the others had gone, Isabella stood with Ethan on his balcony, watching the city lights flicker like stars fall into earth. Are you sure about this? He asked. Getting involved means putting yourself in Reed's crosshairs, your career, your reputation. Do you know what I see when I look at Olivia? Isabella turned to face him. I see your mother, another woman who needed someone to stand up for her. I couldn't help her, but I can help Olivia. Ethan pulled her close, his embrace fierce. I love you, he whispered into her hair. More than I ever thought possible. I know, she replied simply. That's why we'll win. Below them, the city hummed with life, unaware of the battle brewing in its midst. In 6 weeks, Richard Reed's carefully constructed world would either expand to encompass the power he craved or crumble under the weight of his own secrets. And in the balance hung not just Olivia's future, but the fate of every woman Ethan had promised to protect, and the love that had given him the strength to finally face his past. What none of them could know was that Foster's visit wasn't just a warning. It was a prelude. Because Richard Reed had secrets even Ethan didn't know about, secrets that would make the coming fight not just about justice but survival itself. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom glittered with New York's elite, all gathered to support Richard Reed's senatorial campaign. Isabella adjusted her midnight blue gown, feeling the weight of the concealed recording device Regina had carefully sewn into its seam. Beside her, Ethan looked impossibly handsome in his tuxedo, his hand warm and steady against her lower back. Remember, Alex murmured as they approached the entrance, Reed's financial director, Michael Conway, has been drinking heavily since his wife left him last month. He'll be at the bar by now, and he loves to talk. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. While Alex and Regina worked the room gathering intel, Isabella would engage Conway. Ethan would keep Reed distracted, playing the role of potential major donor. Their goal, evidence of campaign finance violations serious enough to derail Reed's political ambitions without exposing Olivia. Mr. Williams, Reed's voice boomed across the marble floor, and the lovely Ms. Clark, I'm so pleased you could join us. His smile was practiced, presidential, but his eyes were sharp as he kissed Isabella's hand. Richard, Ethan replied smoothly. Quite a turnout, I'm impressed. Yes, well, New York knows a winner when it sees one. Reed gestured to his wife, Catherine, who stood nearby chatting with donors. Catherine's been instrumental in organizing tonight's event. Darling, come say hello. Catherine Reed was stunning in a red designer gown, but Isabella noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she approached. Up close, expert makeup couldn't quite hide the shadows under her eyes. Isabella, isn't it? Catherine's voice was soft, cultured. I've heard so much about you. A rising star at Romano and Associates, from what Richard tells me. You're too kind, Isabella replied, studying the other woman carefully. Something in Catherine's demeanor reminded her of Olivia's description, of her early days with Reed, the careful movements, the constant awareness of his presence. Ethan, let me introduce you to some people you simply must meet, Reed said, already leading him away. Potential investors in our new tech initiative. As they moved through the crowd, Isabella caught Alex's subtle nod. Michael Conway was indeed at the bar, his collar already loosened, his eyes slightly unfocused. Catherine, Isabella said impulsively, would you point me toward the ladies' room? Of course, I'll show you myself. In the opulent bathroom, Catherine checked the stalls before turning to Isabella with surprising intensity. You know, don't you, about Olivia? Isabella's heart stopped. I don't. Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. The walls have ears, but... She pressed a small key into Isabella's hand. Safety deposit box. Manhattan Savings Bank. If anything happens to me, everything's there. Everything I've documented since we married. Before Isabella could respond, the door opened. Catherine immediately began touching up her lipstick, her mask of perfect political wife sliding seamlessly back into place. Isabella's mind raced as she made her way to the bar. The key felt like it was burning in her clutch bag, its implications staggering. Catherine Reed wasn't just another society wife. She was gathering evidence. "Miss Clark." Michael Conway's voice was already slurred. Come, let me buy you a drink. We're celebrating tonight." "That's very kind," Isabella said, sliding onto the bar stool beside him. "Although I hear not everyone's celebrating, the finance reports must be keeping you up at night." Conway's laugh had an edge of hysteria. "Reports, they're works of fiction, my dear, pure fiction. Did you know?" He leaned in conspiratorially. "Did you know we have 3 sets of books? One for the FEC, one for the donors, and one—" He tapped his temple. "One for the real money, the Russian money." Isabella kept her expression neutral even as her pulse quickened. "Russian investors are quite common in tech." "Not these Russians." Conway took another drink. "These ones don't exist. Shell companies, all of them. But the money, God, the money's real enough. Millions funneled through Reed's old tech company. Been happening for years, campaign's just the latest pipeline." Across the room, Isabella saw Foster, Reed's campaign manager, watching them with growing concern. She needed to wrap this up. "Sounds complicated," she said carefully. "Hard to keep track of all those shells." "Not with this." Conway patted his jacket pocket. "Everything's here. Every transaction, every shell company, every—" "Michael." Foster's voice cut through the conversation like a knife. "I believe Mrs. Reed needs your expertise on something." Isabella stood smoothly. "Thank you for the fascinating conversation, Mr. Conway. I should find Ethan." But as she turned to leave, she felt Conway press something into her hand. A small USB drive, hidden by the movement of her skirt. The next hour passed in a blur of calculated movements. Isabella danced with Ethan, their bodies close, as she whispered what she'd learned about the Russian money and Catherine's key. He led her through another turn, his expression never changing even as his hand tightened on her waist. "We need to get Conway out of here," he murmured. "Foster's watching him too closely." "Alex is already on it," she replied. "Regina's car is waiting outside." But before they could make another move, a commotion erupted near the bar. Conway was on his feet, shouting at Foster. "Think you can threaten me?" His voice carried across the suddenly quiet ballroom. "I know everything. The money, the shell companies, the real reason for the tech deals." 2 security guards appeared, smoothly leading Conway toward the exit. "Just had a bit too much to drink," Foster announced to the crowd. "Nothing to worry about." But Richard Reed's face told a different story. For a moment his mask slipped and Isabella saw something terrible in his eyes as he watched Conway being led away. "We have to go," Ethan said urgently. "Now." They made their excuses and left, Isabella's heart pounding. In the car, she finally pulled out the USB drive, her hands shaking slightly. "This could be everything we need," she said. "If it's real," Ethan cautioned. "And if Conway lives long enough to verify it." "What do you mean?" The way Reed looked at him. Ethan's voice was grim. "I've seen that look before. The night my father realized the servants had witnessed my mother's fall." Isabella's blood ran cold. "Alex is with him, right? Taking him somewhere safe?" "Yes, but—" Ethan's phone buzzed. The message from Alex made him curse. "What? What is it?" Conway never made it to Regina's car. Somewhere between the ballroom and the exit, he disappeared. Isabella clutched the USB drive. "Then we need to get to Manhattan Savings Bank. Whatever's in Catherine's safety deposit box." "We'll have to wait until morning," Ethan finished. "The bank's closed, and showing up there tonight would tip our hand." They rode in tense silence, both knowing that somewhere in the city, Michael Conway was either running for his life or— Isabella couldn't finish the thought. Back at Ethan's penthouse, they found Olivia waiting with Regina. The TV was on, showing coverage of Reed's gala. "Catherine reached out to me," Olivia said without preamble. "Years ago, right after, she married him. She knew about me, about everything. She's been documenting his abuse, his deals, his connections, building a case." "Why didn't you tell us?" Ethan demanded. "Because Catherine made me promise not to. She said she needed time, needed proof that went beyond domestic violence. Proof of something bigger." Olivia's hand rested on her belly. "Something worth dying for." Isabella showed her the key. "She gave me this tonight. Said if anything happens, to her—" "Then we don't wait for morning," Regina said firmly. "Whatever's in that safety deposit box, Reed will know about it by now. If Catherine was at the gala when Conway started shouting." The implications hung heavy in the air. Catherine. Reed had just unwittingly revealed her hand to a man who'd already proven how far he'd go to protect his secrets. "I'm calling in a favor," Ethan decided, pulling out his phone. "The bank manager owes me. We go now, tonight." As they prepared to leave, Isabella's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Conway's phone just went dark. Last signal. From the East River. "Move fast." The race was on. But as they headed into the night, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. Because somewhere in the city, Richard Reed was undoubtedly making moves of his own, and the next few hours would determine not just the fate of his campaign, but possibly lives as well. What they didn't know was that at that very moment, Catherine, Reed was also in motion, setting in place a contingency plan she'd hoped never to use. Because some secrets were worth dying for, and others were worth killing for. The Manhattan Savings Bank stood dark and imposing against the night sky. Ethan's connection got them inside, but the tension in the air was palpable as they approached the safety deposit vault. Every shadow seemed to hold potential danger, every distant sound a possible threat. "Box 2247, the bank manager said, checking Catherine's key against their records. He looked nervous, constantly glancing at his phone. 10 minutes, Mr. Williams. That's all I can give you." The box contained exactly what they'd hoped for: detailed records, photos, and a thick manila envelope marked insurance. But it also held something they hadn't expected: a USB drive labeled with today's date and a note in Catherine's elegant handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm already gone." Isabella's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, along with copies of documents that made her breath catch. "The Russian money," she whispered, scanning the pages. "It's not just campaign contributions. Reed's entire tech empire is built on laundered funds from Russian oligarchs. He's been their American front for years. That's why he needed the Senate seat," Ethan realized. Political protection from investigation. Regina, who had been examining the USB drive on her laptop, suddenly gasped. "The drive. It's security footage from their house. Catherine had cameras hidden everywhere. She swallowed hard. "There's footage from tonight, after the gala." They crowded around the screen, watching in horror as the scene unfolded. Richard Reed, his political mask gone, confronting Catherine in their bedroom about Conway and the safety deposit box. The footage had no audio, but his rage was clear in every movement. Catherine, standing her ground, showing him something on her phone. Then Reed's expression changing from anger to fear. She had a dead man switch, Isabella realized. Insurance that would activate if anything happened to her. The footage ended abruptly. Regina checked the timestamp. Less than an hour ago. "We need to find her," Ethan said urgently. "Before Reed." His phone buzzed with a text from Alex. Police scanner chatter. Shots fired at Reed residence. Multiple units responding. They moved fast, but New York traffic, even at night, was unforgiving. By the time they reached the Reed mansion on the Upper East Side, the street was a chaos of police cars and ambulances, their lights painting the elegant facade in surreal flashes of red and blue. A detective was interviewing Reed on the front steps. Even from a distance, they could see he was playing the role of distraught husband perfectly. "Mrs. Reed is missing," a uniformed officer told them when they tried to approach. Signs of struggle in the bedroom. Mr. Reed came home to find the door forced open, called 911 immediately. Isabella felt sick. The staged break-in, the missing wife. It was too similar to what had happened to Ethan's mother. History repeating itself, in the worst possible way. But then her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Westside Pier 86, hurry." K. They found Catherine Reed huddled in the shadow of the USS Intrepid museum ship, her gala gown torn, a bruise darkening on her cheek. But her eyes were clear and determined as she handed Isabella another USB drive. "The dead man's switch was a bluff," she said without preamble. "But this is real. Everything. The money laundering, the shell companies, the connections to Moscow, and something else." She looked at Ethan. "Something about your mother." Ethan went very still. "What about my mother?" "Reed was involved. He helped your father cover it up. His first major investment came from your father right after her death. Payment for services rendered, helping to silence witnesses, fabricate evidence." Isabella grabbed Ethan's arm as he swayed slightly. The implications were staggering. Reed's entire empire, the very wealth he'd used to help women like Olivia, was built on blood money from his own mother's death. "That's why he's been watching you so closely," Catherine continued. "Not just because of Olivia. He's afraid you'll discover the connection." "Does he know you're here?" Regina asked urgently. "No, but he will soon. The police are just theater. He has private security searching the city. We don't have much time." As if on cue, headlights swept the pier. 3 black SUVs appeared, blocking both exits. "The proof," Catherine said quickly, pressing a phone into Isabella's hands. "It's all backed up to a secure server. The password is—" The first gunshot cracked through the night air like thunder. Catherine shoved them toward the museum ship's gangway. "Run!" What followed was a nightmare of shadows and gunfire. They raced through the massive aircraft carrier's dark corridors, using their phones for light, trying to find another way out. Behind them, they could hear footsteps and voices, Reed's men searching methodically. "The stern," Regina gasped. "There's a maintenance ladder." They emerged onto the flight deck, the Manhattan skyline glittering around them like a galaxy of earthbound stars. But their moment of relief was short-lived. "That's far enough." Richard Reed's voice cut through the night air. He stood by the bridge, Catherine held firmly in front of him, a gun pressed to her temple. More armed men emerged from the shadows, surrounding them. "It's over, Richard," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the weapons trained on them. "Catherine's evidence is already uploaded. You can't bury this like you buried my mother's murder." "Murder?" Reed laughed, but there was an edge of hysteria to it. "Is that what you think happened? Your mother was a liability, Ethan. Just like my dear Catherine here. Just like all the women who don't know their place. The Russians won't protect you from this," Isabella called out. "Once the FBI has the evidence—" "The FBI?" Reed's laugh turned cruel. "Who do you think has been helping keep this quiet all these years? Power, Ms. Clark. Real power means never having to face consequences." "You're wrong," Catherine said suddenly, her voice ringing with unexpected strength. "Real power is being willing to face them." Everything happened at once. Catherine drove her elbow back into Reed's solar plexus. He staggered, the gun going. Off. Catherine fell. More shots rang out, but these came from behind them. Alex had arrived with a tactical team from his private security firm. In the chaos that followed, Reed tried to run, but Ethan caught him before he could reach the edge of the flight deck. All the years of pain, of guilt, of wondering about his mother's death, fueled the punch that sent Reed crashing to the deck. "You don't have your father's protection anymore," Ethan said, standing over him. "No more NDAs, no more silence, just justice." The police arrived minutes later. Real police this time, along with FBI agents Alex had contacted. As Reed was led away in handcuffs, still ranting about his power and connections, Isabella found Catherine being tended to by paramedics. The bullet had grazed her shoulder, but she was alive. "Thank you," Catherine whispered, gripping Isabella's hand, "for helping me finish what Olivia started." Dawn was breaking over the city as they finally left the pier, painting the sky in shades of hope. But the night's revelations had changed everything, especially for Ethan. Finding out the truth about his mother's death had ripped open old wounds, but also offered a chance for real healing. "What happens now?" Isabella asked softly as they watched the sunrise from the pier. "Now?" Ethan pulled her close. "Now we make sure no more women need NDAs for protection, starting with that legal clinic in Brooklyn." They had won, but victory came with the weight of responsibility. Reed's arrest would shake the foundations of power in New York and beyond. The evidence Catherine had gathered would expose corruption at the highest levels. But as Isabella looked at Ethan, she saw not the weight of his past, but the strength of his future. A future they would build together, turning pain into purpose, secrets into justice. What they didn't know was that in the coming days, Reed's empire would crumble in ways that would test their love one final time, because some men, even in defeat, know how to plant one last seed of chaos. And Richard Reed had saved his deadliest secret for last. 3 weeks after Richard Reed's arrest, Isabella stood in the newly completed Brooklyn legal clinic, watching sunlight stream through the windows. The space had transformed from a construction site into something beautiful, a place of hope and new beginnings. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Tech mogul Reed faces additional charges as new evidence emerges. The investigation had uncovered decades of corruption, with tentacles reaching into law enforcement, politics, and international finance. But it was the personal revelations that had shaken New York society to its core. "The first clients arrive tomorrow," Ethan said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Olivia's already got a waiting list." Olivia had been named director of the clinic, her experience making her perfectly suited to help other women escape dangerous situations. Her baby bump was now visible, a symbol of the new life she was building. "Have you seen the latest from Reed's lawyers?" Isabella asked, leaning back into Ethan's embrace. "About the mysterious evidence he claims will change everything? It's just another desperate attempt to bargain." But something in his tone made Isabella turn to face him. "You don't sound convinced." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Alex called this morning. Reed's been demanding a private meeting. Says he has information about the night my mother died that I need to hear." "It's a manipulation tactic," Isabella said firmly. "He's trying to get under your skin." "Probably. But..." Ethan's eyes were troubled. "What if there's more to the story? What if..." The clinic's door opened and Catherine Reed walked in, her arm still in a sling but her steps confident. Since testifying against her husband, she'd become a powerful advocate for domestic violence survivors. "He sent me this," Catherine said without preamble, holding up an envelope. "From prison. I think you both need to see it." Inside was a single photograph, yellowed with age. It showed Ethan's mother, Claire Williams, sitting in what appeared to be a hotel room. She was writing something, her expression determined. The date stamp showed it was taken the day before her death. "There's more," Catherine said quietly. "In his private safe, I found letters. Your mother was planning to expose both your father and Richard. She'd discovered their earliest criminal enterprises, the connections to Moscow that went back decades. She wasn't pushed during an argument, Ethan. It was a calculated hit." Isabella felt Ethan's body go rigid beside her. Why is he revealing this now? Because of this. Catherine pulled out another document, a copy of a letter dated the day Claire died. She mailed it before they got to her. Reed's people intercepted it, but she'd sent copies. Multiple copies hidden in safety deposit boxes across the city. Time-locked boxes set to open after 30 years. Which is next week, Isabella realized, her legal mind racing. The statute of limitations on conspiracy to commit murder doesn't apply if there's proof of an ongoing criminal enterprise, Ethan finished. which we now have thanks to Catherine's evidence. Reed wants a deal, Catherine explained. He'll reveal the locations of all the copies, provide testimony about that night, in exchange for— No. Ethan's voice was firm. No deals. My mother died trying to expose the truth. We'll find those letters ourselves. The next 6 days became a race against time. Using clues from the photograph and Reed's files, they pieced together Claire Williams' last movements. Each bank they visited, each box they opened, revealed another piece of the puzzle. On the morning the time locks were set to open, they gathered in the Manhattan Savings Bank, the same bank where Catherine's evidence had begun to unravel Reed's empire. Alex and Regina were there, along with Olivia, all of them understanding the weight of the moment. The bank manager opened the final box with trembling hands. Inside lay a thick envelope, sealed and pristine despite its 30 years in darkness. Ethan broke the seal, unfolding pages covered in his mother's elegant handwriting. My dearest Ethan, he read, his voice catching. If you're reading this, then I failed to expose the truth in life. But perhaps in death I can give you something more valuable. The knowledge that I died trying to protect you from becoming like them. The letter detailed everything. The corruption, the violence, the web of lies that had bound their families together. But more than that, it was a mother's love letter to her son. A plea for him to choose a different path. I see so much goodness in you, Claire had written. Promise me you'll hold on to that, no matter what happens. Promise me you'll use your strength to protect, not destroy. Isabella wrapped her arm around Ethan's waist as he read, feeling the tremors running through his body. When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. She'd be proud of you, Isabella whispered. So proud of the man you've become. Later that evening, they gathered at the Brooklyn Clinic for its official opening. The space was filled with supporters, domestic violence survivors, and community members. Catherine and Olivia stood together, their shared experience creating a bond that transcended their past connection to Reed. Alex approached Ethan holding 2 glasses of champagne. To Claire Williams, he said softly, and to the son who finally brought her justice. As Isabella watched Ethan with his newfound family, not bound by blood but by choice and shared purpose, she felt a profound sense of completion. The Idle Clinic would stand as a testament to transformation, to the possibility of turning pain into purpose. Penny for your thoughts? Ethan asked, finding her by the windows where they'd first discussed the possibility of this place. I was thinking about fate, she replied, about how a broken elevator brought us together, and broken people made us stronger. He smiled, touching her face gently. Speaking of fate, he dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that caught the setting sun like a promise made tangible. Isabella Clark, you helped me find justice for my past and hope for my future. Will you? Yes, she interrupted, laughing through tears. 1,000 times yes? The cheers and applause from their gathered family told them they'd had an audience, but neither cared. This moment was the culmination of a journey that had begun in darkness but would continue in light. Later that night, they stood on Ethan's penthouse balcony, looking out over the city they'd helped make a little safer, a little more just. Your mother asked you to make a promise, Isabella said softly, to use your strength to protect. And I intend to keep it, Ethan replied, holding her close, starting with our clinic and ending, well, never ending. There's always more work to do. Together, she added. Together, he agreed. Below them, Manhattan glittered like a field of earthbound stars, each light representing a story, a life, a possibility. In prison, Richard Reed had lost everything, his empire crumbling, his power turned to dust. But from the ashes of his destruction, something beautiful had grown. A legacy of protection, of justice, of love that transformed instead of destroyed. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Because some stories don't end with the villain's defeat or the hero's triumph. They end with a promise kept, a future beginning, and the knowledge that while the past cannot be changed, it can be redeemed. In the soft night air, surrounded by the city they'd help heal, Ethan and Isabella began writing their own story, one that would honor Claire's memory, protect the vulnerable, and prove that love, when anchored in truth and justice, could light even the darkest corners of the world. It was more than a happy ending. It was a new beginning. If you were in Isabella's shoes, would you forgive Ethan's past mistakes with Victoria for discovering that his current actions, protecting women through the NDAs, came from the deep pain of not having been able to save his own mother from abuse? Or are some betrayals unforgivable, regardless of the motivations we discover later? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.